What is up, you all? I'm Des with DesFit, and it has been a fun few weeks testing the Garmin VivoActive 3, and today let's wrap things up in episode 4, the Phantom. Actually, I don't have a name for this episode, but if you did miss the previous episode, check out the description below for links on what I thought about the design and hardware, the interface and software, as well as the built-in activities and how well they performed. So to wrap things up, let's talk about Move IQ, some of the smartwatch features, the battery life, as well as a final verdict on what's good, what's not so good, and if this watch is actually right for you. So one of the things I didn't cover in the activities episode was Move IQ, because technically it's actually not really an activity. I'll touch on that here in just one second. But I did manage to try this out on numerous occasions for walking, running, both indoors and outdoors, cycling, both indoors and outdoors, as well as swimming and the elliptical, all of which are what Garmin says Move IQ can track, with the exception to indoor cycling, but in the interest of science, I decided to try that out. It did manage to understand indoor and outdoor walking and running, cycling outdoors, but not indoors, although it did track a higher heart rate for that time period. Unfortunately, I could not get it to register elliptical nor swimming, and I did perform those for at least 15 minutes just to overshoot the 10-minute minimum it takes to initiate Move IQ. So overall, I think Move IQ is kind of a neat feature, but in my opinion, if you have this level of watch, you probably care about data enough to start an activity and capture data for reals, but maybe I'm wrong. But I do suppose it will work in a pinch if you forget to start an activity. But just note that these will not show up in your activity feed, but only on the day view of the calendar in Garmin Connect. For smartwatch features, notifications worked, although they were pretty basic. For iPhone, these will be one-way messages to the VivoActive 3, and they work well for getting those status updates, but unfortunately, you can't reply from the watch. I did manage to try out notifications on my friend's Android phone, but I apologize because the footage got mangled, so I don't have any real footage of that. But I will tell you that Android notifications do work, but they are a little bit limited with the canned responses that you can reply with. Music controls are going to be super handy, and I actually did find myself using this quite a bit at the gym as well as home when my phone was paired to a Bluetooth speaker. In my opinion, it's actually a very useful feature. The stock weather widget also works well in giving you a glimpse of the rest of the day as well as an extended outlook. The calendar widget can be a great way to see a glimpse of what you have planned for the rest of the day, and lastly, I wasn't able to test Garmin Pay because it wasn't available at the time of this filming, but I may cover that in an epilogue. Oh wait, is it a prologue? No, an epilogue. It's going to be a log of some sort. For battery life, Garmin pretty much always delivers on battery life, but I was actually a little bit disappointed. Although it's not as advertised, you could probably squeeze almost 6 days out of this thing if you put it in 20% or lower brightness, lock the device when it's not in use, and aren't using GPS during that time period. With a fairly typical GPS usage of maybe 30 to 60 minutes per day, you're probably only going to be getting about 2 to 3 days max. You definitely want to lock the device when it's not in use because the touchscreen is so sensitive that any skin contact will activate it, which could drain the battery life even further. But the good news is a full charge from 3% only took a little bit over an hour. So if your watch is drained, you can plug it in for just 20 to 30 minutes before heading out for a run or ride, and you should be totally good to go, unless you're going out for that 4+ hour beast mode workout. And by the way, you really don't need much more than 30%, as even at 30%, it's very readable in nearly any environment. So here's what I really liked about the device. First of all, it looks great, and it's really svelte and very lightweight. It's also extremely comfortable to wear, so much so that you actually may forget that you're wearing it. The strap is made out of very nice material, but it is kind of skinny, but it's not so skinny that it's uncomfortable. It's a very standard 20mm strap, so you're going to have a multitude of bands to choose from, not only from Garmin, but from third parties as well. The touchscreen and large display, which is the same size as the Fenix 5X, is incredible in sunlight, and the touchscreen works really well, and I actually got so used to it that I occasionally try to touch the screen on my Fenix 5X. Plus, the touchscreen works really well with gloves. The simple one-button interface takes some getting used to, especially if you're coming from physical buttons, but overall it's very intuitive with tooltips scattered throughout to help you learn the device, and it's also dirt simple to use for starting, pausing, and resuming a workout. The software interface is really good and simple to navigate, making it easy to use and easy to customize. Sideswipe is also a really nice addition and gives an alternative to the touchscreen, and by the way, it does work with gloves. Also, the new round display makes it so it's more in line with a Fenix or Forerunner in regards to Connect IQ apps, widgets, and watch faces, so they don't have different layouts from round to square designs. It also does most of the daily stuff really well, like steps, calories, distance, and sleep. In regards to activities, overall I think it did really well at nearly everything, and it comes with what I think is a very comprehensive list of activities to choose from. I thought the GPS and heart rate performance was pretty darn good and totally in line with all my other test devices, and funny enough, I experienced actually a lot less spikes in heart rate than I did with my Fenix 5X. Also, I was super impressed by the tracking of indoor walking and running, and after some calibration with an outdoor run or two, it was pretty much spot on with treadmill distances. Lastly, this may sound kind of like a backhanded compliment, but the software at launch was actually really darn good and didn't suffer from a lot of the firmware issues that the Fenix 5 series did at launch. And now for things I didn't necessarily like. Although it's very lightweight, which is a plus for wearability, there's a clear difference between the build quality versus a Fenix. It's not cheap by any means, but not necessarily premium either. Plus, I was ridiculously careful with it and I still managed to get a small gouge in the silver bezel. Also, the skinny watchband pin worries me if you were to get the watch caught on something, and it's definitely not going to be for larger wrists with a maximum wearable wrist circumference of 204 millimeters. Although I said the silver color was nicer than the photos make it appear, I just don't think it's actually going to be that popular, and I think they should have probably just stuck with the slate and white versions. Also, it does have a good design, but it's not exactly the most rugged and masculine looking, so just keep that in mind. The touchscreen is sensitive, but it's actually almost too sensitive, especially with water or sweat. There's also an odd little bluish purple hue to it in certain lighting conditions, and I wish it was a deeper black with a little bit more contrast. Sideswipe is an awesome feature in theory, but it's not as usable in the real world and can be a little bit twitchy. It only has enough memory to save 7 activities, where with the Fenix and Forerunner you can go back for months on end. The altimeter was slightly lower than test devices, with about a 5 to 8% difference with pretty much every GPS activity I did, and indoor accuracy left something to be desired in terms of floors climbed. Finally, battery life was definitely a little bit of a disappointment, considering that's a huge selling point for Garmin, so maybe in the next version it should have a little bit larger battery, and I think even a small increase in weight would barely be noticeable considering it's so lightweight already. So, the verdict. For price and value, I actually am not going to say this is good nor bad, because I actually have two different perspectives on this. First off, $300 is a bargain for what you get in this device in regards to the software, data, and features. But even though the design is much better than the previous VivoActive HR and brings it closer to the Fenix's, comparing it to the Apple Watch Series 3, it makes it kind of tough to swallow at this price point. I think it probably should have been in that $270 price range with the Slate version at $300. But the great news is the price will probably drop rapidly, just like most products do 4 to 5 months after launch. Compared to the Apple Watch, if you're an iPhone owner, this is going to make the decision a little bit harder with the new Series 3, as I actually do think they are competitors, and I'll be pitting them head to head in an upcoming comparison review. But to sum it all up, I think the VivoActive 3 really hits that sweet spot between everyday activity trackers and more serious activity trackers. If you're someone that's graduating from a VivoFit or even upgrading from the previous VivoActive HR, this is going to be fantastic, and it actually may be a little bit more watch than you need right now. But my suggestion is that if you're just starting or even trying to up your fitness game, use those capabilities as an excuse to do more and expand your fitness. Then, if you've been considering the Forerunner 235 but really wanted better looks, then this is going to work really well for you, plus you'll be getting a barometric altimeter. It also collects basic running dynamics like cadence and stride length, and honestly, most people don't need much more than that. It also pairs with standard heart rate straps as well as other sensors like Garmin speed and cadence sensors, so there really aren't any issues there unless you need more advanced data, but then you should probably be considering a 935 or a Fenix. And then finally, if you've owned or considered buying a Fenix and just thought it was way too much watch for you, or even thought that the Fenix was just a little bit too heavy, again, this is a great option and it does a lot. Honestly, I'd say more than the average consumer actually needs, but again, use that as an opportunity to get more fit. Well, thanks so much for watching this review series. And for those of you interested in how this compares to the Apple Watch Series 3, well, you're in luck because that's coming up really soon. So subscribe to the channel for those videos. Plus, in a couple months, I'll have a review on how this actually does for snow sports. Thanks so much for sticking with me. And if you don't mind, you know what I'm going to say. Please hit that like button below and subscribe to the channel. It really helps me out a ton and I really appreciate it. We'll see you soon.